Welcome to our podcast. This is our first episode of Winning at Life. I am your co-host, Luis.
I'm your co-host, Severin.
And today we want to get started on our first ever podcast episode. We want to break down kind of like why we're starting this, give a little bit of like backstory into us, and continue forward. And this is going to be our first episode and hopefully many, many more to come. So we're very excited. So without further ado, let's start with our backstory. You want to get started or should I?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can go for it. Just a brief overview. So, well, my name is Severin. Should I do last name?
It doesn't matter.
Myself?
Doesn't matter.
My name is Severin Spagnola. Right now, I'm a San Jose State University student. I'm studying aerospace engineering as I'm going to be a junior. I am interested in STEM. What else should I say? What?
Just say what people want to hear, right? Like why should they listen to you? Well, what are you doing that's interesting or fascinating that people like?
Oh yeah, how did I forget? I'm currently building a startup named Polaris, and we're specialized in chip verification. So a computer chip verifying that designs made on your computer are going to work as intended when they're actually fabricated onto a physical chip. And so we do that all completely autonomously, which is very valuable over the current traditional methods of handwriting all your like mathematical proofs and assertions and everything with a team of engineers, which is time consuming and expensive. And so we just make that process entirely autonomous. So yeah, definitely I've learned a lot in the process of building the startup. So I think I definitely have some even bigger life lessons over just regular, business advice through all of that time. And of course, I'm still, learning and growing and exploring more. So as that updates, I will have more stuff to speak about on that. And of course, even outside of that, just general life lessons. I mean, beyond just that, I've had lived a few other crazy experiences with my co-host here, and in personal life. So yeah, I'm hyped to share my story and learn more about viewers like you, anyone who may be watching this. So yeah, I'm hyped to be here and hyped to learn and yeah, share more about myself. How's that?
Solid.
All right.
Yeah, so I'll touch base on a little bit about me. Kind of my backstory, my upbringing was very much like a self-improvement kind of backstory. Some of the main accomplishments and things that like I think were the corner piece of just the kind of person that I am today is, I started out at a weight of like 300, lost half my body weight, ended up giving a TED talk about it, and that like really motivated me to like learn how to teach other people to do the things that they want to do, to get the results that they kind of want out of life. And that's kind of why I'm starting this podcast and why I think that it's going to be very valuable. I've always believed that if people knew better, they would do better, pretty much. And it's my mission on earth to kind of be a guide for other people who want to accomplish more of their lives and who want to be inspired. And I've kind of noticed that if you have a group of people that understand each other very well, and they've had similar lived experience, and they're being vulnerable, and they're sharing everything that they know, it builds a community for other people to want to do the same. So that is kind of my backstory and how it's leading up to this podcast. With that being said, why are you starting this podcast?
Well, I touched on it briefly. I want to learn more. I want to share my life experiences and hopefully help other people out there avoid some of the pitfalls that I fell into. I think that I've got a few pearls of wisdom to share, and I definitely want to learn along the way. And yeah, everything that Luis said is very, very much true. I think that people have a lot of potential that they don't really recognize in themselves. And it's very cliche to say, but I think it's very true in my experiences. There are so many people out there who dream pretty big or who have the capacity to dream very big and accomplish very big things. And I want to be the guide to help them achieve that. I want to use my experiences to inspire others, and hopefully that starts a chain reaction, and even just a few people that can spiral into massive change, even like globally. given just a single spark. So that is definitely something I want to do. I want to build that kind of community where going out and doing things rather than just talking about them or thinking about them is the norm. And yeah, I want to inspire others basically, yeah, and I hope that I can be inspired at the same time. So yeah, that's a big reason for why I want to do this.
Super. I think it'll be very important for us to also tell the audience why we named our podcast what we did and the significance that kind of has. So the name of this podcast is Winning at Life. And it's a multifaceted thing. The components of it is like there are certain things that are worth doing with your time on earth that make your entire life worth living. It's almost like the Pareto principle is like 20% of your actions lead to 80% of your results. And in this podcast, we're trying to work on the 20% of the most important things that you can do in order to have the most, lovely, most experience on this earth. So that's kind of why we decided to name it, because I feel like as we've kind of transitioned out of high school, we realized that there were so many things that we wish were taught in the education system that we wish like people just understood as they were entering the real world, that we wish we understood when we were entering the real world. Because I think most people when they're young, they have a big conception that they know what they're getting themselves into. They know how life's going to work out. But at least for both of us, that wasn't the case.
Oh yeah.
So we want to give whatever we can, whatever we've learned, whatever we are continuing to learn in our journey in life, and put it on a podcast so that like other people can listen and other people can get unstuck if they feel stuck, or if they like don't see something as happening right now, they'll understand that it will happen in the future and they just gotta like stay there. So that's why I decided like winning at life is going to be important. That's going to be the title for this. That's going to be the the name of this podcast. But I kind of want to ask you what that resonates to. What is that? Well, what do you feel when you hear winning at life? How does that look like to you?
Winning at life is like, I think of it as fulfillment, right? What brings you, joy in your life outside of just the like typical monotony, of daily life, because very easily you can sort of be, well, as Luis said, you can get trapped or stuck, and that's always it's never really apparent that you are, at first, and even for a very long time after, until you have some sort of reference point to really like compare to and realize. So definitely having that kind of reference point, especially if you don't have many other, friends in your life who have the same ambitions as you, it's hard to find close reference points like that. I mean, the internet makes it much easier as well, but definitely, having a helping hand there, guidance in that sense, and knowing what kind of path you're walking is what I see as like winning at life. Definitely, I touched on like joy, but like thinking a lot about what brings you that, because that's, I mean, Luis briefly mentioned this as well, but it's like coming out of high school, I really had no idea sort of what I wanted to do, and I realized like slowly over the course of like the last year or two, what really motivated me. And I think one of the core things of like actually succeeding is like realizing that, like what motivates you, to actually go out and do things, because you can be stuck in cycles or stuck in monotony and you don't really have true motivation, but you just keep going because that's what you've always been accustomed to. Like it's just been like that forever. But once you actually break out of that and start thinking about what actually motivates you, that's when you start to feel challenged, and it's hard, and it feels like sort of like a hollowness, kind of like, because you don't have that same kind of conformity that you used to have. So it's like the bottom got pulled out from underneath you, but that's right on the brink of like where you really want to be before you realize like okay, now I actually know what I want to do. And having that realization is like the first step in that direction. And then from there, it's just following that path, however hard it may be. And then, the journey on that path is what I see as like winning at life. Even if you don't make it all the way to where you wanted to go, or, if you far surpass where you intended to go, that's just walking that path that you feel is right, I think, is winning. And of course, achieving goals too, achieving all the goals that you set on the way. But yeah, that's what I see it as, at least. And so that's what I want to help people do. And so that's why that name is significant.
Awesome. Yeah. It's so many different components to it. And honestly, I think for me, I like starting out in childhood, like I kind of want to touch base on why this is actually important, how our upbringing kind of brought us to make the choices that we did to ultimately lead us to sitting here right now and like actually doing this, right? So I want to touch base a little bit on my childhood and kind of like, the responsibilities that I had to deal with when I got started and why I'm here now. So
should we go like chronologically, like, and take turns? Like, I was thinking elementary school, and then you go, I go, and then like middle, or like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Sounds good. All right.
We'll bounce off and we'll start with elementary school.
Awesome.
But like for me, my context is I was raised like in a very traditional kind of like Hispanic household. And my elementary school experience was honestly not too bad. I think for my first couple years, it was very normal until I got maybe into 4th or 5th grade. And this was the point where I started thinking more for myself, and I started being the kind of person that other people wanted to learn from. So I was always the person that was helping out literally everyone, and I was so recognized and so rewarded for being a teacher for other people. So much so that I won, a good amount of rewards and accolades for that. And it kind of made me realize is like, I have such a burning, passionate desire to learn everything that I can in order to help teach other people. And it was so interesting because I remember being very young, maybe like 11 or 10, and I would wake up every single morning, like at 5 in the morning, and all I would do was just be on my laptop, and I was just reading and watching videos and just trying to learn absolutely everything about everything that I could, right? It was a blast. I had so much fun just trying to understand how the world worked, just trying to understand like all of these little nuances, everything about history, everything that you can think of, right? It was great. And out of that came like such a passionate desire to know how things work and to understand it and to be able to teach that to other people who don't understand it nearly as well, and just be the bridge between, like ignorance and thriving this world. That's my elementary school experience summed up. What about you?
Yeah, my elementary school experience, well, growing up, my mom very much instilled a love of reading within me. Nonfiction, fiction, everything basically I could get my hands on. And what stemmed from that is just, I learned a lot as well, especially about academics. Like I was big into like math and science and all of those fields in particular. Those are like my, focuses. And just everything about them, whether it's like, space or like quantum mechanics or like everything, I was just reading whatever I could get my hands on. My mom would take me to the library every week, we'd check out books. In school, I'd always be, doing whatever assignments and then going on Khan Academy and doing more like math or doing more like science lessons and just learning about everything I could. And I'd got this like calculus book when I was in like 4th grade or something, and I just read it and like try to understand the equations within it. And it was just the experience of trying to solve a puzzle, like a math equation, or trying to solve a problem, just has always resonated with me ever since. I just love solving problems. I love fixing things. And that's what really has like kept me going ever since then. That's all that reading and sort of imbued that within me. And so yeah, I would go read that calculus textbook and try to understand what was in it, and not really do a great job, but I made not bad progress. I'd be doing like Kumon and other extracurricular activities, just learning all about like math and everything. And I definitely, from all those experiences, I was just, a lot of learning about like all the science topics I could as well, and building Legos outside of school. I really learned to love engineering as well, and that kind of like building things. And so that's definitely, those core sort of memories have just cascaded forward like dominoes into the rest of my life. And so yeah, those are like my core experiences in elementary school that sort of set the stage for my later years so far.
Set the stage is a good phrase, because
Yes,
I think
definitely.
everything really does stem out of your childhood.
Yep.
I think the kind of person that you become stems out of your childhood and the experiences that you've had, and kind of like everything comes from inside. And I think when you're a child, you are the purest that you'll ever be, because you're so uninfluenced by perceptions and other people's worldviews and other people's standards and expectations for you. And this is where like the purity of the heart comes out, and you just start figuring out what you do so naturally and you just love. Like for you, it's building, right? And it was engineering, and it's like just understanding how things work. And for me, I had like a passionate, burning desire to teach people, right? And it all stemmed from these like little small things that we were doing as kids that were like just so fun. It was so effortless for us.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, like if we continue this, it's going to be great. And that kind of like transitions me a little bit into the next stage of life, because obviously we had a path now, we kind of understood what we liked. And I think in life, the hardest thing is to just stick to it, right? Because there's so many different people and so many different opinions and shiny objects that come your way. And the best thing that you can do is just stick to what you were born to do and what you're good at, right?
Oh yeah.
And in middle school is such an interesting stage where everyone's trying to figure out what they want, and people are figuring out like, okay, this is the stage in life where I either become, like a little ghetto, I become like one of the nerds, or I become like, a normal kid, right? And you have the path to go down all three. You have the ability to go down all three. And middle school is kind of where people make that decision of like, okay, what kind of lifestyle do I want to live moving forward?
Permanent friend groups start to form too.
Exactly right. And a permanent, almost like worldview starts to form.
Oh yeah.
So this is really interesting. Just super random, but I was at church one day, and what the pastor there was saying that your worldview typically forms at the age of 13. And I thought about that, and I was like, I wonder if that's true. And then for a while, I actually rejected that notion, even though I looked it up and it was true. Like your worldview does get formed at 13. And now that I think about it, now that I'm saying it out loud, it reminds me so significantly that like when everyone was 13, they were deciding the kind of people that they wanted to be. It's not that the worldview was established and like completely done, but they made a conscious choice of like, hey, this is the kind of person that I'm most aligned with, so I'm gonna keep at it this way. And so certain people went down wrong paths, and their high school career was a manifestation and amplification of their middle school choices. And some people went down the right path, and middle school was an amplification of their middle school choices. But it's just so interesting to see how like middle school was that really pivotal like age in everyone's lives, where they had to decide, what kind of person do I want to be. And like my middle school experience was definitely pretty interesting. Like I'd say that the biggest thing that came out of that was in my 6th grade and 7th grade year, I was like a very normal kid. Like nothing really was special was going on until I decided that I wanted to get into, we had the STEM program at our middle school. And I decided, and I was like, man, like ever since 6th grade, like me and my friends really wanted to get into this program, because we were all like, I was in a group of like kind of like nerds, right? And it was all our ambitions and all our goals to get into this program. And our first year, we all applied, and out of all of us, like none of us got in, right? I didn't make it to interviews, and I think 1 or 2 of my friends made it to interviews.
Really? In 7th grade?
In 7th grade. Actually in 6th grade. In 6th grade.
Oh yeah, because 7th grade started. Yeah.
In 6th grade, I didn't get into interviews. Only one of our friends got into interviews. And we were all like really happy for him, but he didn't get in, and it was whatever. We knew that it was going to be like pretty difficult to get in, but we were optimistic to apply for next year. And next year we applied as well, and the same friends that applied, all of them didn't get in. And the thing that really like stood out to me was I probably wasn't going to get in either. right? Like if I was being very honest, I was not going to get in, even the second time around. And the second time around is kind of like your last time in middle school. So basically, the thing that really like changed me or like allowed me to actually enter that program was, I remember we were in a science class, and we had some of the STEM students and STEM professors come in to like try and teach the class, right? Just so that they could get whatever, extracurricular community service hours, whatever they needed, right? So the STEM teachers, they would come into our regular science class, and they would like start teaching us like STEM subjects, and we would go into like the STEM lab, and we could do like 3D printing and like laser cutting, right? And it was fun, it was very entertaining. And I remember I was with like one of the teachers at STEM, and I was the kind of person that was like, I finished pretty early, and I was literally just helping out everyone, right? I was helping out everyone understand how to do it, and just like it just came very easy naturally to me. And she was quite impressed by that, and she liked the fact that I was helping out everyone, and she invited me to like the STEM lab is what it was. And she was like, hey, like you're doing really well in this, I really like that you're teaching other people, do you want to come to the STEM lab and like spend some time here? And I was like so like giddy, I was just jumping up and down with joy. I was like, dang, like this is exactly what I wanted, it was my opportunity. And it was like one thing led to the other, but I ended up going to the STEM lab. I got pretty close with some of the students that were in the STEM lab and in the STEM program, and that kind of like led next thing to the other, where she ended up asking me, she was like, do you want to join the STEM program? And I was like, fuck yeah, I do. I definitely want to join. So second time we applied, and one thing led to the other, and last thing that I knew, I was in the STEM program. And that was such a perfect like realization for me, that you don't necessarily need to have it all to still get to the places that you want to get to. I think a lot of people think that people that are ahead of them are significantly smarter than them, or that they had some circumstance in their life that gave them an insane advantage that they currently don't have. But that's not what it is at all. Like, there are people that are way dumber than you in the position that you want to be in. Like, out of all my friends that I was like friends with, and in 6th grade and 7th grade, of like my nerd friends, I was probably the dumbest one out of all of them, and I was the only one that made it into STEM. Which goes to show, it's not necessarily about what you have, it's what you make of it, right? Like, I made the most out of my opportunities in being in very common core classes until I got transitioned and accelerated into STEM classes. And that to me was like such a pivotal thing, where I realized, like, hey, like, you don't have to be the smartest, you just have to do the right actions. You just have to do the things that get you into the rooms that you want to be in to begin with. And that kind of led me down, like, all of the things that I did in high school, but it all stemmed from middle school. And it was like, this was my awakening, that if you just work hard on the right thing, and you never give up, and you just put yourself in the right place at the right time, anything can happen. And STEM was like, I didn't stay in it for that long, but it made me realize, like, okay, this is what I was kind of like born to do. I was born to teach, I was born to accelerate, I was born to just like, never give up.
That's a great takeaway. I didn't even know all of that, like, backstory of like the application struggle and how you actually got in. I didn't.
Yeah.
That's my first time learning about that. That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, we met in STEM, so my path was very similar actually. After elementary school, I went to middle school, and yeah, sixth grade wasn't anything too crazy. I was mostly just doing more of the same stuff that I had before. I made some friends who went with me to STEM because we applied in 6th grade, and then we got accepted. And so we all went to the 7th grade batch that year. So yeah, in 7th grade, that was sort of where things really like changed a lot, because all throughout my life so far, I had been like in the Common Core mostly, doing stuff on my own outside of class. And then once we were in STEM, it was like that was like the norm. Like, that was the expectation, was to be doing things outside of class, and doing like a lot of things outside of class. Like, there were a lot of extracurricular programs. Like, we were doing, what were all the ones? We were doing like first what was the Lego one?
First Lego League.
Yeah, first Lego League. We're doing like these tech challenges and all of that, like all these like competitive tracks, and every semester we had something going on. We were doing like science fair, and then the classes were accelerated. So I was definitely loving it, and that was the first time where I really felt as well like everyone in the room was smarter than me, like that. Because in elementary school, I was much more, on top of everything. I was doing stuff beyond school. I felt really far ahead. And then once we got into STEM, that was like everybody else seemed to have everything way more put together than I did. And of course, a kid doesn't think of it that way. They don't know what imposter syndrome is or anything like that. But it was definitely interesting. It was a very much like sudden reversal. And I wasn't like behind or anything, of course. I was still holding my own. Like the classes were about my speed and whatnot. But it was very interesting to see that like flip. And we'd do like these math competitions, like the AMC or like the Math Olympiad, and I would be like scoring pretty badly compared to everybody else. And so I guess that's a little bit of a parallel to what Luis said about like not necessarily needing to be like the smartest in the room or having it all put together to get to where you want to be. I definitely, if I had to say what got me in, I think just passion for learning. I think demonstrating the passion that I had was like what really got me there, because I wasn't as smart. I still am not as smart as like all those other people, but I was hungry to learn. I was ready to be in that room. I was ready to sort of take advantage of all the opportunities that were available there. And I did to some extent. We'll talk more about that in high school, because I don't think I did as much as I should have. But yeah, so I got in a STEM program. That was very enjoyable. I made a lot of great friends there. Like Luis said, yeah, that was about where things sort of consolidated a lot. Definitely had a lot of smaller like worldview changes since then, but that definitely was like a pivotal moment in my life for sure. I met Luis in 8th grade, and I think this is a pretty long running friendship, and a pretty important one as well. So yeah, definitely that middle school years were like a pivotal moment in my life. I certainly learned a lot. I don't know if I changed so much as a person. Most of the change was in like high school more so. But yeah, 8th grade, was when COVID hit. That was a while ago. Wow, 8th grade. But yeah, so definitely that was my middle school experience. Not anything crazy, insane. Nothing as big of a takeaway as I would say like Luis's was, but definitely sort of a continuation of what had already been going on, and things sort of started compounding. And then, of course, the experience of like not being the smartest in the room or whatever would definitely become more relevant in like high school and everything. But that was sort of where that started as well, which was really interesting. It was good, like ego check. I definitely learned like humility around those years, which is important for sure. Like I think that was, because if I had stayed in Common Core, I think I might have been a lot more like egotistical or narcissistic. Not to say that I was so much in elementary school, but I definitely felt on top of the world. And then once I had been in that room with all those other people, I was like, wow, okay, I need to step it up a little bit, right? And so yeah, that was important for me, I would say. As I am now, I'm glad I went through that experience. Yeah, but yeah, that was about middle school for me.
Yeah, I really like that. I like to hear that like middle school was really the transition, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. Yeah. The transition between like the kind of person that you want to be, and when you put yourself in a room with other people that you didn't know existed, right? You didn't think like for one moment that like, oh wow, there's people that are way smarter than me, way more ahead. It changes your worldview. It establishes your worldview pretty much. Yep. And you're just like, okay, I got to work harder now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's like I'll like add on to that a little bit when it comes to like the smartest in the room. Like for a long time, especially in elementary school, I was never the smartest in the room. Maybe not until like 5th grade, right? And even then in 5th grade, there were people that were arguably smarter than me, but also in STEM, I was probably one of the dumbest when it came to like different conceptions. Here, I'll let you get that.
It overheated. I'll just resume it when it's.
No worries.
But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so in STEM, I was arguably one of the dumbest people when it came to, I mean, mathematics, I was never my strong suit. And there were just certain things that were just not my strong suit. Math was definitely not one of them when I was like pretty early on. But it made me realize like, I still wasn't perceived as the dumbest, even though literally I probably was one of the dumbest when it came to like math in STEM. But I had such a strange advantage that most of those kids there did not have. And they kind of like admired so much about me, which was I had a different kind of intelligence that was kind of lacking in that department, which was like more social intelligence. The social intelligence component I had like, you know, I had done very well in. I had had a lot of really good experience in middle school. And one of the things that I noticed and people were jealous of in STEM was that I was very likable, I was very sociable. And it got me into doors that even people that were in STEM that had been there for a while and that were like at the top of their STEM game were not achieving.
Soft skills versus hard skills.
Soft skills versus hard skills.
And they tried to drill that into us, but it's yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, like you have people that are very, very smart in terms of analytical, like understanding math and sciences. And I mean, to an extent, like, yes, that is very important, especially when you're in your younger years. I think the thing that really differentiates people in their later years is what they do with that. And a lot of that, it always has to tie back with your implementation of that into society and being able to express it to society. And the only way that you can do that is your social skills. So although like I wasn't in STEM for that long, I as much as I made like a holler and hoot about wanting to get into STEM, I realized that it wasn't for me, so I ended up leaving. I was there for like a year or even less, you know, which was so funny. And one of the things that I thought was so like funny about that whole experience is that even then, even after I left, like all the people in STEM and all the teachers and everything continued to admire me like so much, even though I was no longer in the program. Even considering me like to be some of the best assets that came out of STEM, or like, you know, one of the smartest people there. And it just made me realize like there's so much nuances to like winning at certain levels, right? And this is kind of like goes back to like the intro of winning at life, right? There are certain things that certain people just don't have, and they might be winning in other ways, and you know, you might be winning in other ways as well, but like we're just trying to win at life in general, so it's a combination of everything. And that made me realize is like this is a great way to transition into high school. In middle school, you kind of decided the kind of person that you want to become. In high school, you kind of have to execute on it a little bit, right? And then you start realizing is like, okay, like now I might be good at math, I might be good at science, but I really have to get good at this like social thing so that I don't get bullied or picked on, right? Especially like as a nerd, right? And I actually wouldn't consider myself to have ever been a nerd by any stretch, but I just loved learning, and I loved being like one of the people that knew the most in the rooms. And definitely like in high school, I had like a fair amount of insecurity of not knowing or just being dumb, right? My goal in life was always just don't be dumb. And I kind of lived by that goal. But that would transition us into high school. So after high school, I ended up leaving STEM, and I ended up just getting into like a very normal high school. I started taking like Common Core classes. It was just very average. There was nothing that came out of that, and it was during COVID, so it was like a point where like, you know, boredom was very rampant and there was not much to do. And unfortunately during that time, for better or for worse, I think it actually turned out to be better. Since I was so bored at home, like during COVID, during high school, like one of the things that I just do is like eat. And I just ate out of boredom, right? So I ended up actually gaining a significant amount of weight. So probably towards the end of COVID, I was weighing in at my heaviest at like 300 pounds. And I had never been that heavy. I had always been pretty overweight my entire life. And I never made anything of it. I was just like, oh, this is kind of how it is, until I put on that much weight. And then I ended up transitioning into this choice school in Santa Clara, and it was like a much smaller school, and our graduating class was probably about like 40 or 37, somewhere around there. And it was like a completely new world for me, right? And because I knew absolutely no one there, so I had to make friends like literally from scratch. And the kinds of people that attended this school I'd never been surrounded by. Like in my early years, it was always like Hispanic people and like Christian culture, and then in high school it was not that. It was a little bit of everything. It was like Muslims, it was Christians, it was atheists, it was like just everything, right? So it was such an interesting cultural shift for me. But I was like, as much as they may be a cultural shift, like I have to understand is like, how do I win at this game still, right? And I went through so many ups and downs and having to understand how life really works, because at this point, even in middle school and elementary school, although I did get some success, I still had zero idea of how I would actually be successful or how I would actually win at life. And it kind of made me realize is like certain people, like you will try and do what you have to do in life, and people will either like you or dislike you for that. And I had never been actively disliked until I got into high school. And it made me realize is like, oh man, like I might be doing what I think is right, but there are people that are going to dislike me for just the kind of person that I am and the kind of things that I want to do. And
when you were very visible too.
Yeah, exactly. When I was very visible too. And I think like there were so many like things that happened in high school, so many like failed relationships and friendship issues and everything.
That could fit into a whole other podcast.
That could fit into a whole thing, right? And it made me realize that I found myself to be in like one of the worst positions in my entire life, which I consider hitting rock bottom. So I hit rock bottom kind of like in my sophomore year, and like rock bottom for me was like very close to like suicide. And that was one of the darkest moments, but one of also the most beautiful moments, because it made me realize there's no other way to go than like either up from here. I either die or I go up. And when you're in the eye of the storm, you don't realize that everything around you is kind of shifting and changing, right? And what I didn't realize was that was the cornerstone for my growth and my evolution. And that without that, I probably would not be here in front of you, even talking, on a podcast. I would have never like thought that this was something that I should do or could do. And after I hit rock bottom, I was like, okay, I need to change something, because that current existence wasn't worth living. So I made radical changes, and I ended up losing like, more than half the weight. And during that transition, like the interesting thing about your physical fitness is that it's not necessarily a physical representation of who you are, but it's a holistic representation of who you are, right? So your physical beingness is a direct reflection of everything that's in your mind and your standards for yourself, right? So, not to point fingers or anything, but you'll tend to notice that people that tend to be overweight don't have life figured out fully. There's always some components of their life that they wish that they could have, whether it's like self-control when it comes to eating, or like long-term vision of where they want to be. And I was one of those people, right? Is like I overate because I was bored and I didn't know really how to control my emotions. And one thing led to the next, and I was realizing is like, this is leading me down the wrong path. So after making a drastic change, my personality changed quite a bit. And I realized like I can't continue to live the same life that I was before, because I was so miserable. And I was like, it literally just like, almost took me down to hell or something, and it was beautiful. A lot of it came with like the best stories and the best lessons that I could have ever learned. And after I lost all the weight, and after I became a completely new, literally like, you couldn't tell that it was me. I changed so much physically, I changed so much mentally, and I had a new group of people around me, and I had a new worldview, and I had things that I wish I would have had back then. And I was like, man, I'm succeeding. I feel like I'm doing something right now. And this was the point in my life where I was like, let me continue doing what I was doing before and start teaching this stuff, right? Let me give a TED talk. Let me like try and package everything that I've learned to try and help other people, because I wish that during my rock bottom there was someone that was there to like guide me, you know, and push me in the right direction. And although I didn't have that, I wish that I could be that for someone else at this point, you know. So that's kind of why I decided, it's like, okay, I have to work hard to push myself and put myself out there. And ultimately high school was like, it was the best learning experience, right? Because out of that came everything else that I really wanted to do. And I won all the accolades, all the awards. I won the game of school pretty much, I thought. And what it made me realize is, like, on my graduation day, I had my friends' parents tell me, and they were like, wow, you know, like, I like you because you're a man that knows what he wants. And everyone was like cheering for me and everything. And I was cheering for myself, and I was like, okay, I like this entire life thing is going to be so easy. It's going to be a piece of cake. I genuinely thought I had everything figured out. And coming out of high school, I realized I very much did not have everything figured out. And there were so many components that I wish I had like just known at the time that I graduated. But my high school experience did give me a lot. I learned a lot, I grew a lot, and I ultimately like started becoming the person that I wanted to be. And like, I think out of high school, you're forced to meet reality where you're at, regardless of where you're at. Right? So like out of high school, if you're prepared or not prepared, you have to meet reality. At some point, you know, your parents will stop coddling you and you'll just be forced to execute. And if you can't execute, it looks very ugly. If you can execute, it's good for you. But regardless of what stage in life you're in, life hits you. And whether you're prepared or not, you know, it's up to you. So that was kind of my high school experience. It was a little bit of everything, but ultimately made me realize is like, you know, I kind of need things like this podcast, right? I need to understand how life works. Otherwise, I'm going to just fail and fall flat on my face and not get up. And I knew what rock bottom was like, and I didn't want to go back. So knowledge was kind of the antidote to hopelessness for me.
Yeah, that's definitely heavy. I have to say high school was definitely a very pivotal moment for me as well. So COVID in particular, actually, I have a well, yeah, okay. So ninth grade year, sort of going into high school, you know, we're all like bummed out, like, oh, we're not going to be there in person. That was definitely a very interesting experience in of itself. But one of the main things that really changed me in that first year was this one friendship I had. So when we started science fair, I was put in a group with two of my friends. One of them still my friend, the other one I haven't talked to her in like a long time. But they both like they both argued like nonstop. They both like hated each other almost. And so we are all in a group, us three were in a group together. So I had to be sort of like a mediator between